In 1941, as fascist Italy was collapsing across Ethiopia, something happened in the forests and river crossings of western Ethiopia that official history would later pretend never existed. An Italian force, 1,000-strong, moved through Ilubabor toward the strategic town of Gore. They expected a broken people. They expected fear. They expected submission. Instead, they were stopped. Bridges were destroyed. Supply lines vanished. The advance collapsed. Ethiopians remember this place as Sambé. But if you search most World War II archives, if you open Italian military records, if you flip through standard histories of the East Africa Campaign, Sambé does not exist. No named battle, no admission of defeat, no acknowledgement that Ethiopian patriots, not European armies, broke an Italian column in 1941. This is not because Sambé was small. It is because Sambé was humiliating. This is the story of why the Ethiopian victory at Sambé 1941 was wiped from history. To understand Sambé, we must first destroy a myth. Italy did not lose Ethiopia and leave in the 1930s. After the invasion of 1935-1936, Italy occupied Ethiopia, but it never truly controlled it. Ethiopian resistance never stopped. Fighters known as the Arbegnoch, the patriots, remained active across the countryside. Ethiopian historians and regional records consistently note that Western Ethiopia, Ilubabor, Wolaga, Kaffa was especially resistant to Italian rule. The terrain favored locals. The population refused collaboration. Italian authority existed on paper, not on the ground. Then came June 1940. Fascist Italy entered World War II. Suddenly, Ethiopia became dangerous for Italy in a new way. British forces were advancing from Sudan and Kenya. Ethiopian patriots were coordinating. Italian supply lines were overstretched. And Mussolini's empire in East Africa was built on intimidation, not stability. Italian commanders began launching punitive operations not to govern, but to crush resistance before it could link with Allied forces. Ethiopian sources describe these operations clearly: raids, arrests, reprisals, forced compliance. Sambé was one of the places where Italy tried and failed to reassert control. Sambé was not chosen by accident. Located in western Ethiopia, in what is now the Ilubabor area of Oromia, Sambé sits near rivers, forest corridors, and narrow crossings. Ethiopian regional sources repeatedly emphasize the importance of the Kebir River in this area. For an occupying force, this terrain was a nightmare. For Ethiopian fighters, it was home. Italian military doctrine relied on roads, bridges, and supply columns. Ethiopian patriots relied on movement, concealment, and timing. They knew where a convoy had to slow down. They knew where bridges could be destroyed. They knew where an army could not maneuver. Ethiopian commemorative accounts, later reported by Ethiopian media and regional authorities, describe Sambé as a choke point, a place where Italian movement depended on infrastructure that could be removed in minutes. This was not a battlefield in the European sense. It was a trap. According to Ethiopian regional records and commemorative statements, later published through Ethiopian media outlets and aggregated by All Africa, the events at Sambé unfolded in 1941, during the final phase of resistance before full liberation. An Italian force often cited in Ethiopian sources as numbering in the thousands advanced toward Gore, a strategic town in western Ethiopia. What happened next is consistent across Ethiopian accounts. Ethiopian fighters destroyed bridges over the Kiba River. Italian movement was halted. Supply lines were disrupted. The column could not advance. The force was forced to withdraw. This was not a symbolic action. It was operationally decisive for the area. Ethiopian sources do not exaggerate casualties. They do not invent named Italian commanders. Instead, they emphasize the result. Italian control in the area collapsed. The Italian advance failed. Sambé held. And importantly, this victory occurred before Emperor Haile Selassie's return to Addis Ababa in May 1941. It was part of the pressure that made liberation possible. So why isn't Sambé in most World War II histories? The answer lies in how colonial powers recorded war. Italian fascist military reporting followed a pattern well known to historians. Victories were inflated. Defeats to European armies were reframed. Defeats to African irregulars were erased. Italian documents routinely referred to Ethiopian resistance as banditry. Locations were left unnamed. Losses were minimized or excluded entirely. Battles involving British or Commonwealth forces like Keren or Amba Alaji were impossible to hide. They entered the record. Sambé was different. It was an Ethiopian victory, achieved without European command, in terrain Italy claimed to control. To record Sambé honestly would have been to admit that fascist authority was hollow. So Sambé vanished not from Ethiopian memory, but from imperial archives. History does not only survive in documents. It survives in memory, ceremony, and land. In Ethiopia, Sambé was never forgotten. Ethiopian regional governments, cultural bureaus, and historical commemorations continue to mark the victory. Ethiopian media reports, including official anniversary statements, describe Sambé as a symbol of unity, resistance, and indigenous military success. These commemorations matter because they reveal something deeper. Ethiopians did not need Italian records to know what happened. The land remembered. The communities remembered. The story endured even when global history books stayed silent. This is why Sambé resurfaced in Ethiopian public discourse decades later, not as a myth, but as a reclaimed truth. Sambé forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. African victories were not rare. They were filtered out. The liberation of Ethiopia in 1941 did not happen only because Allied armies arrived. It happened because Italian power had already been broken by years of resistance, victory by victory, place by place. Sambé was one of those breaks. To restore Sambé to history is not to exaggerate the past, it is to correct it. Because when victories like Sambé are erased, Africa is portrayed as passive. When they are restored, Africa is revealed as strategic, resilient, and decisive. Sambé was not missing from history. It was removed. And now, it stands again where it always belonged. If this story was never taught to you, ask why. If it was never written down, ask who decided what mattered. Because history is not just what happened. It is what power allowed to be remembered.